The e-mobility space in Kenya is booming, and on today's show, we get to introduce you to someone who's doing an amazing work in that space. Are you interested in getting into the e-mobility space, whether it's as a rider or as an innovator? Please do stay tuned because this will inspire you. My name is Stella Bogonko, co-founder and CEO Jacob's Ladder Africa, and this is Green Jobs Africa. Hi, Nabil.
Hi.
Welcome to the show. It's great to have you. Your story has really inspired many people. A lot of young people that have heard about e-mobility have always thought it's a thing of the future, but now can see that it's here and now it's with us. There are people that are benefiting. It's amazing to hear, especially the testimonies from different people who are benefiting from your organization. So first of all, thank you for making it a reality for many people, and then also for inspiring so many young people. And so today on this show, we get to hear your side of the story. We heard about what you do and how you do it, but then want to understand your entrepreneurial journey into starting Greenwheels. And so perhaps you could run us through how you ended up in entrepreneurship and then specifically in Greenwheels.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on the show, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Kenyan. I was born and raised here down at the coast in Mombasa. I was also fortunate to have studied overseas. So I did boarding school and university in England, and then spent the first part of my career working there. So I'm a consultant by background. But as soon as I was able to, I wanted to move back home. Home was calling. So I started off with the family business. We have a manufacturing company. And then sort of the startup space has been appealing to me and has always appealed to me. So prior to Greenwheels, worked in 2 startups, one of which was my own. But most recently, I was the head of Kenya and East Africa for a jobs platform called Fuzu. Lot of exciting things they're doing there, and a lot of inspiring things around job creation, moving, sort of building the future of work. And every role and every kind of opportunity I've seen or wanted to embrace has always been around kind of like doing something good. So Fuzu was the start of that. We proudly kind of put a lot of young Kenyans into jobs. We're doing some really exciting things with the sort of future of remote work. I was there during the pandemic, and so obviously seeing a lot of people
that transition,
exactly. And so there's clearly a talent shortage globally. But when you see what's happening on the ground here in Kenya and wide on the continent, more widely. There's a lot of talent, and there's a lot of young people willing to kind of embrace exciting opportunities. And so we were doing some really exciting stuff with trying to put them into work remotely, but overseas.
So that's exciting for me because, as you know, Green Jobs Africa is all about jobs. As Jacob's Ladder, we are excited about jobs, but green jobs in particular, because everyone is going into sustainability. The whole world is going in that direction. So the future of jobs really is green, and we have to be able to make that transition. So from Fuzu and the other startups, the startup that you were in as well, you moved into Greenwheels. Where did that idea come from?
So so I have a business partner, and so the two of us who also happens to be a very good friend. And so we were having dinner one day, and he had been looking at a couple of e-mobility companies, or companies in the e-mobility space, and we decided to try and kind of come up with an idea that was slightly unique. I think most of the actors or operators in the space today are largely trying to manufacture motorcycles and or electric motorcycles and sell them to the end user. We felt that for the market to really take off, for there to be an early adopter, businesses who care deeply about sustainability more than the average consumer could be the needle mover that sort of starts that adoption curve. And so we put this idea on paper, early last year, pitched it to a number of businesses, and I think today we're sort of known as Greenwheels / Uber, and I'm proud to say that Uber were the first kind of business to kind of see the vision that we wanted to, and so they're our first partner, and we are looking for others and will embrace others.
How was that journey? Because one of the other things that we realize that challenges, especially that young people face, is you could have this brilliant idea, or at least you believe it's brilliant, and you want to pursue it, but then there's the various hurdles. One of them being the believability, especially for early technology, the early adopters are the kind of references that you're making. You're lucky that you managed to get Uber. But then for young people who have amazing ideas, but they've not been able to get that organization or partner or consumer that they're looking for, what would you tell them, or how would you encourage them to do that? Because your journey seems to be a bit shorter than the usual for many people. So how would you tell them, especially because this is not your first startup?
Sure. So I think it's a couple of things really, and one of which is really knowing who your sort of customer is. So in our case, it was obviously businesses, and today climate and sort of job creation related startups are attractive, and so that was obviously going for us and maybe helped us sort of accelerate a little bit faster. But it's absolutely about knowing your customer and having. So that is probably, I would say, step one. And then step two is building a robust business model behind the idea. And so it's one thing to have a fantastic idea, but does it make commercial sense? And I think, anyone who's a young and budding entrepreneur today, actually doesn't need to be young, but young and budding entrepreneurs, will realize that the capital markets are difficult. So to find capital as an entrepreneur to fund an idea is difficult.
So you have to be able to distinguish yourself from the many who are looking for the funding.
Absolutely. And so while a great idea is fantastic in itself, it's not the only component in what someone who would want to fund that business, if you're not funding it yourself, would look for. And so having a clear sort of way to monetize or commercialize that product or that idea is equally as important.
So did you fund your startup, or did you have to raise funding for it?
So between myself and my partner, we've self-funded it.
Okay, so which is unique. And for us, especially because a large number of our followers are much younger, and they're excited about green jobs, but they just don't know which direction or how to get into it. Speak a bit more about the funding perspective. So assuming that you're a young person and you have this brilliant idea, how do you get that person, because the people who are funding this capital available, but how do you cut yourself, or how do you distinguish yourself from the other people who are also looking for funding?
So the space is there are, as you said, there are lots of different options. Obviously you can go to a commercial bank and potentially raise debt instead of equity. Obviously there's the whole venture capital space that you can go and pitch an idea to a bunch of investors who take the, kind of early stage ideas and startups to and then fund them moving forward. It really depends, and I think it also sort of depends on the idea. So Greenwheels is not a traditional VC venture capital kind of business. It's a transport company in the electric space, and so we're not a tech company like a Google or a Facebook. We're sort of we're a company in the logistics space. So for us, it was easy to kind of look at, like, to know that, okay, we're going to go to like a bank, for example, and say we have motorcycles that we're financing, and it's climate friendly and it's this and that. So made a business case to the bank to say finance 80% or 90%
so
of the motorcycles.
So the banks financed you to buy the motorbikes, right?
Correct.
And that's your business model. You buy and then you lease to the likes of Uber and anyone else that would need them, right?
We don't lease them, so we provide a service. We provide a service. So in the Uber example, we have an arrangement with them where we have a number of motorcycles that are available on the Uber platform, and so when you book an electric motor through the Uber app, it's our bike that fulfills that order. So we're a fleet partner to Uber.
So in your story, as you were telling us about the benefits that you give to the riders, we noticed that you offer them quite a number of benefits that are definitely not available even when they're working for themselves. You know, the NHIF, the NSSF, the WIBA, the insurance, whether or not they're working at work or not, you know. And that was rather interesting because I thought that would increase your costs. right? So what
Yeah.
was the motivation, especially for you as an entrepreneur, what was the motivation to do that in spite of it probably eating into your profit?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, as I mentioned with my story, I genuinely fundamentally believe that, for-profit businesses can still do good. And so, yes, of course, we can cut all these benefits and turn a bigger profit, but ultimately, will it create long-term value both for us as a business and for our drivers who we want to kind of, who are our core of our operation? So we did a couple of focus groups before we started the company and before we started operating.
Yeah.
And we found that sort of consistency in income, the lack of sort of like access to government services, and insurance in the case of, for example, accidents and things like that. Unfortunately, these are a reality for, border drivers. These were some of the key pain points. And so we tried to address them individually. So the WIBA in particular, we offer something called WIBA Plus, I think it's known as in the industry, which means that whether they're at work, it's a work injury cover, but the plus component means that they're able to have this benefit in place even when they're not at work.
When they're not at work.
So, our driver could be playing football on a Saturday with his friends, break his leg, not be able to work for 2 weeks or longer, and the WIBA benefits will still cover them.
Let's switch up a bit to two areas that I'm particularly interested in. One is the notion, the narrative that has been there against electric bikes.
Okay.
There's been, of course, you would be aware, the different undertones and different narratives that have been peddled around why the challenges that riders that had tried to adopt them earlier were having. One was in the case where they buy, right? Which is something that then you've addressed, because when they buy the bikes, they seem to be more expensive than the other bikes in terms of the capital outlay required. And so for you, because they don't own the bikes, you then are taking that cost, to yourselves, right? Yep. So, but then there's the other narrative around the health impact, especially, of course, on the men. And then you could probably also speak to the issue of, do you have women drivers? Is that something that you're looking at doing? Is there any uptick in that? So how have you managed to address those subtle issues that have come up from a narrative perspective?
Yep. So I'll take the first bit around the sort of hesitation around electric bikes or the transition to electric. Yeah. So the reality is that the industry is still very much in its infancy stage.
Yeah.
There are a handful of manufacturers and none of the big names. So in the motorcycle world, the petrol motorcycle manufacturers, the Bajaj, the TVSs, the Hondas, they have not decided to sort of enter the market yet. And in a way, it's similar to Tesla. When Tesla started in the US, they were a small startup. No one knew them, no one believed them. And so it takes companies like that to sort of start the transition. And so we have some of those, both locally available, local manufacturers, as well as internationally, in the likes of India and China, etc.